Welcome everyone to a special bonus episode of Tales from the 90s. Don't ask me why I got green stuff flashing everywhere and I'm wearing a cowboy hat. It has nothing to do with the video. This month's bonus episode is all about WrestleMania. Being WrestleMania season. Last year I did one with my top moments and matches, but I figured I'd go more in depth in this one and just give my top 10 favorite WrestleManias of all time. Just my own personal list. It's not... if you disagree with it, that's completely fine. A lot of people might. My number one is probably what everybody else's number one mostly is. I know on these countdowns, when I come up with lists, a lot of times my number one's some obscure thing nobody's ever heard of. This week is probably not that. Well, this month, I should say. I do, if you've never seen any of my videos before, I do a weekly podcast where I pick a random month and year from the 90s, go back and talk about it in depth. And then once a month I do a bonus episode just on any topic of my choosing. Can be from any time period. And being WrestleMania season, I had to pick WrestleMania. I'm going to my top 10 WrestleManias, and then right before number one, I'm going to give my worst WrestleMania of all time. And like I said, in my opinion. But we're going to start with number 10 with WrestleMania 10. How fitting. I first saw this on a VHS tape I was given by somebody... it was about 2003. But if you see me look down at my phone, I've got the matches and stuff all typed out because I can't remember 10 WrestleManias worth of matches. So I just kind of got it there as a reference. And I'm not going to go too in depth on every match. But anyway, yeah, like I said, I never got to watch this live because this was March 20th, 1994, Madison Square Garden, which was home of the first WrestleMania. And at this time, I was only watching WCW at this time, really. We had cable on and off, but when we did have cable, I would be watching WCW on, WCW Saturday night at the time. That was before Nitro. 18,065 people in attendance, sellout at Madison Square Garden, of course. And this is actually the first WrestleMania without Hogan or Savage, two of the, mainstays of the WWF golden days. Hogan had left the year before. I think Savage left either the year before or this year. Oh, no. I messed that up. Sorry. It's Hogan's last WrestleMania. I'm not even going to edit that out because I'm an idiot. Just going to leave that in. No, what I meant to say, it's the first WrestleMania without Hogan, who had been, of course, in every WrestleMania before that. And it's Randy Savage's last WrestleMania. There, I got it right. But it was his actual last televised WWF match as well. Little Richard sang America the Beautiful. And the commentators for the night were Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler. Always a fun pairing there. Vince, what a maneuver! Jerry Lawler getting to insult Vince McMahon on camera and not get in trouble for it. The main build-up to the title match was a little convoluted that year. It was obviously the winner. They started a couple years. I think the year before in '93 was the first year they started the whole. You get to go to WrestleMania. You get to get the title shot in WrestleMania if you win the Royal Rumble. Well, in this year, Lex Luger and Bret Hart both went over the top rope at the same time. So that led to President Jack Tunney had to decide who would get the title match. So they figured only fair they both get a title match, but that both competitors would have to wrestle twice in one night. And, of course, the champion, Yokozuna, had to wrestle twice in one night, which I don't even see how that's fair to him. They tie, so he has to wrestle twice. But anyway. So it was a coin toss, and Lex Luger was the winner. And by winning, he had to face Yokozuna first and then Bret Hart later, which makes no sense. You'd think the winner would get, an easier match and not have to face Yokozuna first. Only have to face him last or something. But anyway, that was the main thing. And because Bret Hart and Owen Hart were conveniently feuding at the time, Bret got to face Owen to start the show. But before the show started, there was a dark match, which, if you don't know too much about wrestling, a dark match is a match that's held only for the crowd that's there in the building. The Heavenly Bodies defeated the Bushwhackers. But that opening match between Owen Hart and Bret Hart was a complete classic. And like I said, it was Owen Hart versus Bret Hart, and Owen actually won the match. I had to look again to make sure I was right. Owen actually won the match. So obviously that gave Bret a lot of, not momentum, but I guess negative momentum there, you know. You got to face either Yokozuna or Lex Luger later in the night, and you just lost to your brother. But that was definitely a classic match. Go out of your way to watch that one. Then there was a weird segment with Cy Sperling, the president of the Hair Club for Men, presenting Howard Finkel, the ring announcer, and he had a toupee on. Like, it's just, you could tell they were getting ready, especially 95 coming up. They were getting ready for like some of the bad years of the WWF with like the super cheesy stuff. Then next was a mixed tag team match between Doink the Clown and Dink the Clown against Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna Vachon. And Bam Bam and Luna won that match. Obviously, it would have been funny to see Dink get a pin over Bam Bam Bigelow or something, but thankfully they didn't do that to him. But I think that was one of Bam Bam Bigelow's like last big matches. Of course, he would have the main event next year, WrestleMania 11, against Lawrence Taylor. But you know, they were really building him up at the time. Then they had this weird false count anywhere match where Randy Savage defeated Crush. Like I said, it was Randy Savage's last match in wrestling. I cannot speak today. I'm saying all these wrong facts. It was Randy Savage's last WWE televised match, or I should say WWF at the time. But yeah, this is a weird false count anywhere match. Nowadays, you think false count anywhere, you know, you pin them outside the ring, inside the ring, outside the building. It don't matter. But in this match, you had to pin your opponent on the outside and then get back in the ring. And then if your opponent didn't get in the ring in 60 seconds, then you won. Like, that was just a weird thing. Anyway, Macho Man ended up winning because he like used like a pulley thing to like tie Crush's leg up so he couldn't get back to the ring. I mean, smart. Like, I don't know where they came up with that rule, and I'm glad they got rid of it. Although it would be kind of funny to see it come back now. WWF Women's Champion Alundra Blaze pinned Leilani Kai to retain her title after a German suplex. Men on a Mission, freaking Mabel and Mo, Mabel later known as Viscera, one of the most dangerous wrestlers of all time. Anyway, they defeated WWF Tag Team Champions the Quebecers with Johnny Polo as their manager, which of course more famously go on to be Raven. Won by countout. Polo pulled his men out when they were getting beat up, so they lost by countout but kept the titles. Classic heel move there. And then we get that first WWF title match. WWF Champion Yokozuna with Mr. Fuji and Jim Cornette defeated Lex Luger by disqualification. Now, I should have mentioned, it was also decided there was going to be a special referee for both the title matches. Well, they also had celebrities involved, because you know how they did. Donnie Wahlberg was the guest ring announcer, and Rhonda Shear, who was like a USA Network celebrity or something, was the guest timekeeper. she peaked at the time. I can't speak, and that's not good for this podcast. Timekeeper. Anyway, the special referee was revealed to be Mr. Perfect. And Luger lost this match by DQ, like I said, because Cornette and Fuji were up on the apron, and he was fighting with them. And Mr. Perfect was trying to get them down, while Lex Luger was pinning Yokozuna, and Mr. Perfect didn't see it. So Lex got mad and pushed Mr. Perfect. So Mr. Perfect just disqualified him, which turned him heel. It's like, how does that turn him heel? He's doing what a referee should. But anyway, yeah, Lex basically got screwed or squandered, depending on whose side you'd believe, out of that title match there. So, kind of an anticlimactic. Good thing that wasn't the actual end of the event, because that would have sucked as the ending of a WrestleMania. Next, we got Earthquake defeating Atom Bomb with Harvey Whippleman after a splash in 35 seconds. I guess just a time filler. And then next came one of the all-time greatest matches of all time, WrestleMania or not. It is the, not the very first, but probably the one that's recognized mostly as the first ladder match in WWE. And that was the Intercontinental title match between Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels that Razor Ramon won. The backstory on that is Shawn, I think he had to vacate the title because of injury. Let me see. I think I wrote that down. No, he didn't. He didn't defend it long enough or something. I don't remember the actual reason. I think there might have been some behind the scenes stuff like there always was with Shawn Michaels in those days. So anyway, they held up the title in a tournament. Razor Ramon ended up winning it. Then Shawn came back with the original Intercontinental title and saying, I never lost. I'm the champion. So, they go back at it, back and forth. So they decided to hang the titles above the ring, and what proceeded was an absolute classic. Nowadays, when you look at the nowadays ladder matches, it's like, well, they didn't jump off this, and there was no tables, and 12 people getting involved, so how's it a classic? But it was. It holds up if you're not, I don't want to say, like, newer fans suck or anything, but, if you're a fan in your 30s to lower, you're probably going to look at this match and be like, oh, that's just basic. But my age, this was, like, revolutionary at the time, and still would hold up to me over just bashing somebody with tables. There's a place for that, and I have no problem with table matches or nothing. It's just, there's just something about it. Like I said, Scott Hall won it. or Razor Ramon at the time. Scott Hall is obviously who it was. But the only problem with that is they went like longer than they were supposed to. Like, there was a timekeeper backstage that was telling to end the match, and they kept ignoring the referee. So because of that, they had to cut out a 10-man tag team match, which on air they said that the match was not going to happen because the bad guys couldn't agree on who was going to be the team captain or something. But anyway, this match was obviously not going to be that big of a thing. I mean, listen to the people that were supposed to be in it. IRS, the Head Shrinkers, Rick Martel and Jeff Jarrett versus the 1-2-3 Kids, Sparky Plug, Tatanka, and the Smoking Guns. So, obviously, it's not the end of the world that match was cut. And then that left only time for the main event, which was, again, the WWF title match. Bret Hart challenging Yokozuna. Of course, both men had fought already. Yokozuna won by DQ and Bret Hart had lost. So, Yokozuna has the momentum. And this was actually the main event for the year prior at WrestleMania 9, besides the Hogan stuff, which I'll get into that a little bit later on. But, the second time in a row that that was the main event. But this time it was different. First time Bret Hart went in with the title. This time Yokozuna was champion and been dominant champion since King of the Ring the year before when he beat Hogan for it. But Bret ended up like terrible looking. It looks horrible. But Bret ended up winning after Yokozuna fell off the ropes. Like, it looks terrible. They should have had him just like, I don't know, hit him with something, or maybe Mr. Fuji or Jim Cornette actually hit him with something and knock him out. But the ending looked crappy, but the fans didn't really care because it was a big moment. Bret Hart conquered the horrible foreign heel, and everybody came out to celebrate. Owen Hart came out to like just glare at him like I beat you, but you're in the end of the night in the ring getting celebrated with the title while I have nothing. So pretty much the aftermath of this show, him and Owen would go on and have a feud throughout most of the year. Really, really good. I think their best match was at SummerSlam in the steel cage match, that classic blue steel cage. But yeah, Bret would would win the majority of the feud after that. So definitely a good way to start off the countdown here with WrestleMania 10. Like I said, out of the top 10, it's my least on the list, but that doesn't mean it's bad by any means. Definitely a lot of good matches. As you'll see with some of these, there'll be a lot of stinkers in here too. Not every match can be, even the best. Even on my number one, there's still a couple that are stinkers. But next we go for number 9 on this list, is WrestleMania 3. Now, being in 1987, March 29th to be exact, I was, too young to watch this at the time. I first saw it on a special DVD that I got. It's got special pop-up facts and stuff if you turn them on. It's a really cool thing. I wish they had done it with all the Manias. But this was from the Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan. The first stadium WrestleMania. 78,000 in attendance. They claimed it was 93,000. There's people that claim this and that, but according to the people that run the building, apparently it was 78,000. But the entrance was so big that they had to have these little carts to carry the wrestlers down to the ring, except Hogan, who went down on his own. But they were dressed up to look like mini little wrestling rings. It was really cool. Almost wish they'd bring something like that back. It'd make people get to the ring a lot quicker. But Aretha Franklin famously sung America the Beautiful. Vince with that WrestleMania 3! You know, that huge entrance that they like to show in all the packages. Well, at least until Vince was gone from the company. Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura were the commentators. Can't say enough about their chemistry together. They were so funny. Just going back and forth at it. Let's see. And there was like special guest commentators throughout the event. Okay, so the opening match was the Can-Am Connection, which was Rick Martel and Tom Zink defeating Bob Orton Jr. and Don Morocco with Mr. I'm going to mess up every time. Mr. Fuji, I should say. Rick Martel gave Morocco a flying crossbody to win the match. And then we had a full Nelson challenge, which is obviously you win by putting your opponent in the full Nelson. It was between Hercules with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Billy Jack Haynes, and it ended up in a double count out where they both got out of the ring and didn't get back in. Kind of a stinker. Then we got Hillbilly Jim, the Haiti Kid, and the Little Beaver defeating King Kong Bundy, Lord Littlebrook, and Little Tokyo by DQ in a mixed six-man tag team match, which is obviously little people or midgets or whatever you want to call them. I'm not trying to offend anybody. Two of them on each team, and then just, I don't know what you go, a regular sized person. But anyway, both Bundy or Hillbilly Jim were not allowed to, physically interact with the midgets or anything, or there'd be a DQ, and King Kong Bundy did. So, he lost the match for his team, but also the midgets on his team turned on him. There was I think it was WrestleMania 21 in Hollywood when Eugene was out there like, I remember when King Kong Bundy got beat up by the midgets. But it was funny, they all turned on him. He's like, he's beating up one of our own, and everybody beats up on King Kong Bundy. It's one of them classic things. Like, the match itself is whatever. It's just like the whole thing around it is just like iconic in WrestleMania history. Roddy Piper, I skipped one there. The Dream Team, which is Brutus Beefcake and Greg Valentine, defeated, they had Luscious Johnny V and Dino Bravo by their side. Defeated the Fabulous Rougeau Brothers when Dino Bravo interfered. And during the match, the Dream Team kept arguing with each other. And at the end, they would kind of get into a pushing match where everybody would just leave Brutus Beefcake there, which kind of would lead to what happened in the next match, which was Roddy Piper defeating Adrian Adonis with Jimmy Hart, which was also the Dream Team's manager, but he was in this match instead of their match. But it was in what was called Piper's retirement match, because he was going to film movies, so he was retiring, although he would end up coming back, obviously. But during the match, Brutus Beefcake ran in and prevented Jimmy Hart from cheating, and then would cut Adonis's hair after the match, which of course led to the Brutus the Barber Beefcake part, which is obviously Brutus Beefcake's most famous, or probably the only good thing he's ever done, is being that barber character. Then we had a six-man tag team match. The Hart Foundation, which is Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, and Danny Davis, the referee, not the OVW owner, defeated the British Bulldogs and Tito Santana when Davis hit Davey Boy with Jimmy Hart's megaphone. As you'll see in this one, in a lot of cases, the bad guys won most of the matches. This is a really strange wrestling. I know because of the two big matches later on had the good guys going over, or as that's what they say in wrestling. They had the good guys winning. I think that's why they had so many bad guys win. But it's still, when you look at it, on paper, it's still kind of weird, how that turned out to be. Like the bad guys would be winning most of these matches. The next one, Butch Reed with Slick pinned Coco Beware by hooking his tights. And then we've got one of the most classic matches of all time, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat with George Animal Steel pinning WWF Intercontinental Champion Randy Savage with Miss Elizabeth, of course, to win the title. And I mean, this thing was a absolute classic. There's people that are like, I can't remember, was it Chris Jericho or Edge? I think it might have been Jericho that said that they'd practice this with a friend in their basement with their friend, or even with their stuffed animals. This match, they would have it recorded and would do move for move. It came out later on that like Randy Savage was like he was paranoid about everything, but he wanted this match to go so well that like him and Ricky Steamboat had like practiced this for like a month before it happened, and Ricky Steamboat was like tired of it all because, you know, he's from the same he's from the same generation as Randy Savage, but I mean, him and like Ric Flair were the type that just do the match in the ring. You know, we don't need to plan this and this and this. You know, maybe they know what the end is, but they're not going to plan every single thing out. Well, you know, Randy Savage wanted every single thing planned out, but it ended up working out. You know, it became obviously one of the greatest matches of all time. Definitely the match of the night. It's up to everybody else to pick their favorite match of all time, but definitely a great match, and you know, much deserved win there by Ricky Steamboat. You know, planned or not, it was still great. Then we got the Honky Tonk Man with Jimmy Hart pinning Jake the Snake Roberts with Alice Cooper using the ropes. Back to the bad guys winning. The Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov with Slick defeated the Killer Bees by DQ. Hacksaw Jim Duggan came down to try to stop the interference, but they caught him hitting Iron Sheik with the 2x4s. The referee did, so they got disqualified. But then we get to the main event, which is another one of the best matches of all time, and not because of its technical sense, but just the historic stuff and everything around it. It was the WWF title match against Andre the Giant with Bobby the Brain Heenan. And of course, they'd been saying Andre the Giant had been undefeated for 15 years, which everybody, of course, now knows isn't true. You know, he'd lost, even in their own company, he'd lost, it just not televised. So, you know, and back then they didn't have the internet, so they can say, oh, but on this day, you know, back then it's like, oh, he's never lost? Okay, we believe it. But anyway, you know, Andre wanted a title shot and aligned himself with Bobby the Brain Heenan and, like, tore the cross off on a Piper's Pit, like, famously. And, you know, Hogan was bleeding, and it was such a big spectacle. And, of course, you know, what is Hogan going to do? You know, he says he's going to slam the Giant. We don't see that happening. He's never been slammed. But although there's multiple people, including Gorilla Monsoon, who's calling the match, has slammed Andre before, you know, claiming, oh, he's never been slammed. But anyway, I'm sure if you're a wrestling fan, you know how this one goes. Hogan ends up winning, keeping his title. I think it would have almost been an even bigger deal if somehow Andre had the title and Hogan won it from him. But I can see, you know, the motivation of Andre, you know, being this good guy for years and Hogan's friend, you know, turning his back on the fans to align with Bobby Heenan because, you know, he can finally get a title shot that way. So I guess I see the appeal of that. But, of course, Hogan does the slam heard around the world and, you know, hits the leg drop for the win. You know, classic match there. You can say what you want about its technical skills, you know, whatever. Still a classic match. Of course, Andre the Giant would actually end up winning the title. I believe it was in January on Saturday night's main event. It was that big controversy between the, you know, Dave Hebner was the ref, but then this other Rebner, combined Hebner and referee into ref. Anyway, I'm done with trying to speak, apparently. But this, like, you know, the huge controversy, they had Dave Hebner as the referee, but then they had another one, and before they, you know, it was acknowledged they were twin brothers. You know, I think Earl Hebner had originally was refereeing, I'm going to say every word but refereeing in Jim Crockett Promotions and the NWA. You know, so he wasn't there, so it wasn't like they acknowledged on camera, there's, you know, these twin referees. No, they said that this one referee was, you know, $1 Million Man used his money to give plastic surgery to this referee to make him look like Dave Hebner. But anyway, there was, you know, they screwed Hogan out of the title, and then Andre immediately sold the belt to $1 Million Man, which the president, Jack Tunney, said was illegal. You know, so they held up the title in a tournament that would take place at WrestleMania 4, which, of course, Randy Savage had, you know, been turned into a good guy by then. He ended up winning the whole thing. He beat Ted DiBiase in the finals and then became champion. And, of course, that would lead to WrestleMania 5, where the Mega Powers would explode, you know, Hogan versus Savage. But just a little bit of history there. Definitely the peak of, like, the WWF's golden years, you know, of the 80s, I would say, would be WrestleMania 9. Or 9. WrestleMania 3. Not in WrestleMania 9, trust me. That's not the peak of anything. My 9th pick on the list is not WrestleMania 9. But coming up now is WrestleMania... not WrestleMania. Number 8 on this list is WrestleMania 21. And I actually watched this one live It's the very first one I actually got to watch live. I watched it at my sister's house. They had like a watch party for it. So it was really cool to get to actually see WrestleMania live for once. I've seen other pay-per-views, of course, by then, but never gotten to watch WrestleMania live. And this is April 3rd, 2005 from Los Angeles, California, the Staples Center. And it's the first held there, but the fifth WrestleMania that was held in LA. And it was called WrestleMania Goes Hollywood. And it featured all these really cool, like, movie parodies of, like, movie trailer parodies, but using the wrestlers, and they were commercials for the event. They had, some of the best ones. They had Triple H, like in Braveheart, and Ric Flair was walking beside him going, woo! And I think it was Christy Hemme and Kurt Angle, maybe, I think, if I'm remembering it right. We're doing the When Harry Met Sally, I'll have what she's having type thing, and you can't handle the truth, and just all that, all that stuff. Definitely one of the most, the best build-up I think they ever did as far as like commercials to a WrestleMania. 20,193 in attendance, and the set looked like a Hollywood premiere with like a curtain. The commentators for Raw were JR and Jerry Lawler. Classic combo there, of course. Same with the commentators for SmackDown, Michael Cole and Taz. When people think of SmackDown after the brand split, commentator teams, it's probably Michael Cole and Taz is mostly thought of. Just like with Raw, it's JR and The King. Ring announcer Lillian Garcia performed America the Beautiful. But the dark match, again, before it happened, was a interpromotional battle royal, which they like to do a lot just to get a lot of people on there. This one featured 30 wrestlers. This was before it was called Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Booker T won this. He last eliminated Chris Masters. Then the opening match is a pretty good one. It's actually between co-tag team champions Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. They had like a friendly rivalry going on at the time. So they weren't feuding or anything. But Rey Mysterio ended up getting a quick victory at the end. And, they ended up shaking hands. But it was kind of the start of Eddie Guerrero's heel turn, which would come a little bit later on. And then, of course, sadly, it was his last WrestleMania because he passed away in November. But definitely, a great match there to start the show off with. And then we get into a really big historic match, which was the very first Money in the Bank match, which is in storyline. And I think actual reality, I think Chris Jericho was the one that came up with the idea for this. But, of course, as most wrestling fans know, Edge won this match. And, of course, you win Money in the Bank, you get a briefcase, cash in for any title you want for up to a year from when you won it. Other people in this match were, obviously, Chris Jericho, like I said, Chris Benoit, Shelton Benjamin, Kane, and Christian with Tyson Humko. And, of course, Edge would then go on to cash in the briefcase at New Year's Revolution, which was held in January in Puerto Rico, I believe. John Cena had just been through a grueling Elimination Chamber match, retained his title. And at this time, you didn't know. You thought nobody knew what you could do with the Money in the Bank. Because, nowadays it's taken for granted. It's like, oh, he can cash in any time. The champion in the match here, he's getting beat up. Is there going to be a cash in? Back then, nobody knew that. We just, as wrestling fans, we all assumed that, well, he'd have to announce it. The match is going to happen here. No, but he just comes out after the pay-per-view, and Vince comes out to make it official so that way everybody knew. John Cena, you're going to defend your title against Edge right now. Of course, later on, you'd have the run down to the ring with the referee, like a 24/7 hardcore title match rules back in the old days. But, yeah, that's like I said, that was a very first, Money in the Bank match and the cash-in were all revolutionary. Then we had a segment where Eugene came to the ring, like I was talking about before, with the, I seen the midgets. He's talking about how great WrestleMania is. And then here comes old Muhammad Hassan out with Daivari, saying how, it's a tragedy and everybody's racist against him. That's why he doesn't have a WrestleMania match. And they start beating up Eugene. Then Hogan's music hits and he comes down and takes them out. And, of course, him and Eugene pose at the end. A great moment for WrestleMania. Then we have The Undertaker extending his WrestleMania streak to 13-0, pending Randy Orton after a tombstone. 13-0 was a pretty big deal at the time, and of course we knew what, the streak was just starting to get talked about during this time. I mean, they'd started talking about it, I think, around WrestleMania 18, but, it really just every year kept building. WWE Women's Champion Trish Stratus retained her title, pinning Christy Hemme, who had Lita by her side after a chick kick. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat. Then we get one of the all-time classic WrestleMania matches, or just plain matches, Kurt Angle defeating Shawn Michaels by submission. And of course, that was, like I said, classic match, probably the match of the night easily. And that would be the start of a not on paper best of 3 series where they called it that, but it pretty much was. Shawn would win the rematch at Vengeance later on. And then there would be a rubber match at what they called Raw Homecoming. It's when Raw was switching back from Spike TV back to USA. It's a 30-minute Iron Man match, and Kurt Angle ended up winning the series. And my throat is going away because of the frog in it. The more I tried to talk with it, the more it went away. But I wanted to get through that because that's such an iconic match. Go out of your way to watch that one for sure. Then we had a special Piper's Pit segment, hosted by Roddy Piper, obviously. And his guest was Stone Cold, and it was just a weird exchange. Like, Roddy Piper was just, like, by this time, like, really, like, he was always kind of out there with his interview segments. But, by this age, he just tended to ramble on, and most people didn't understand what he's talking about. Anyway, him and Stone Cold are going back and forth, slapping each other. Then Carlito comes down, and, of course, they beat the crap out of him. And then Roddy and Stone Cold toast each other with beer, and then Austin lays out Piper with a stunner. Great way to end that segment, weird as it was. Then we had, speaking of weird, here's a real stinker of the night. Aki Bono defeated Big Show in a sumo match. The less said about that match, the better. Just don't go out of your way to watch this, unless you want to see almost every bit of Big Show besides... And I don't know how that stayed covered. Anyway, it's a sumo match. It's not even 2 minutes long. It's garbage, obviously. But then we get the 2 main events. And this really is a changing of the guard moment here. The first match, John Cena defeated WWF champion, WWE at this time, I should say, champion JBL to win the title. And... Now, of course, we had John Cena and Batista, the two touted as the 2 future stars of the company, going to be stars now. They ended up in the last 2 in a Royal Rumble, and they went out at the same time, and they weren't supposed to. Like, it wasn't supposed to be like a tie or anything. And Vince was so pissed, he ran down to the ring, tore his quad, and then when he got in the ring, tore his other quad just to restart the match so Batista would win. Then Cena ended up winning a tournament to get a shot at JBL. So, he wins the WWE title. And in the main event, Batista defeats Batista. I cannot speak. I'm not having a stroke here, people. I'm pretty sure of it. Anyway, a lot of names and dates and everything going on with this one. But Batista ends up beating Triple H for the World Heavyweight title. Ric Flair was in Triple H's corner. And, of course, after, big ending there with Batista finally getting... Batista won the Royal Rumble, and then there was that whole scene where... I was actually at one of the events where they made it look like JBL ran over Batista. Or tried to run over Batista. If I can get this frog out of my throat. But, Triple H's thing is, go to SmackDown, win their title, and we'll Evolution will dominate both brands. Batista hadn't made up his mind yet, so Triple H is like, well, I got this idea. I'm going to get a white limousine, put some horns on it, make it look like JBL's, and, and make it look like I'm trying to run him over, so, Batista's going to think JBL is going after him. He's going to go after JBL. Well, the thing is Batista overheard Triple H and Ric Flair talking about how their plan worked. And then the famous thing in the ring where, he holds up the contracts and then puts his thumb down and, Batista bombs Triple H. Well, anyway, after that, after WrestleMania, when Batista won the title, we would end up having Batista would end up facing Triple H 2 more times and beating him both times, including Hell in a Cell, and that kind of ended their feud. And then they had the draft around in the summer, and just so happened John Cena got drafted to Raw and Batista got drafted to SmackDown. So the titles flipped shows, and the champions continued from there. Cena became the face of Raw. Batista basically became the face of SmackDown. Well, he tried to be, but he kept getting injured, so he didn't really have much momentum on top. They eventually would end up facing each other at WrestleMania 26. But by then, I think, if Batista would have stayed consistent, it could have been that, face of Raw, face of SmackDown, the face of both generations. It kind of was, but at the same time, it was like so many others had become big at that time, where Batista didn't feel as big of a star as Cena. And they kind of used that in a story where, and then Batista ended up famously, I quit from his wheelchair. But yeah, that was WrestleMania 21. Definitely a big event. And like I said, changing of the guard, you see who the new stars were. We're out of the Attitude Era. We're kind of in this in-between. This is the start of, this era now, pretty much. If I can get rid of this frog in my throat, it'd be nice. But now we're going to move on to WrestleMania, I should say number 7, WrestleMania 24. And I watched this one live. This was March 30th, 2008 from Orlando, Florida, the Citrus Bowl. The first WrestleMania to actually be in Florida. Can't believe it took them 24 to get there. Kim Kardashian was the guest host, but she was barely on screen, so it wasn't enough to annoy. It was called the biggest WrestleMania under the sun, because of course it was outdoors. 74,635 in attendance. John Legend sung the America the Beautiful. Whatever. Can't stand him. Commentators for Raw, JR and the King again. SmackDown was Michael Cole and Jonathan Coachman. I wish it was Taz, but Taz was on TNA by then. I believe. No, he wasn't. Him and Joey Styles were doing the commentary for ECW. Sorry, I got my time wrong there. There was a dark match before another Battle Royal. But this one actually had reason. Kane won a 24-man interpromotional Battle Royal because they like to, when it's a Raw versus SmackDown, they like to make a big deal out of it. But anyway, he won the Battle Royal and it got him an ECW title match later that night. First match of the night, JBL defeated Finlay in a Belfast brawl after a clothesline from hell. And of course that was, the whole, Finlay, Hornswoggle was Finlay's son and JBL beat him up. Then CM Punk won Money in the Bank. And this was his first of 2 years in a row actually winning it. The other competitors were Chris Jericho, Mr. Kennedy, Carlito, Shelton Benjamin, and MVP. Like I said, he won this match 2 in a row. He's the only person so far to ever do that. And he ended up cashing in on an episode of Raw in June on Edge to win the World Heavyweight title for the first time. So obviously they're still showing Money in the Bank is this stepping stone to glory. At the time nobody had lost a Money in the Bank, a cash in, I should say, not the Money in the Bank match. Obviously everybody lost the Money in the Bank match except the winner, but nobody had ever lost during a cash in at this time. Then we had another Battle of Brand Supremacy, which really had nothing to do with it. But Batista from SmackDown defeated Umaga from Raw after a Batista bomb. They just threw that brand thing in there. Just a reason to get those two to feud, because they were on different shows. They could have had them interact with at the Royal Rumble or beat each other up, but no, it's interpromotional. Who cares? Let's see. And the only ECW match on the show, Kane defeated ECW champion Chavo Guerrero Jr. in 11 seconds after a chokeslam to win. You can see what they thought of ECW at this time. Or any time, really, when you think about Vince. And then we got one of the big matches. Shawn Michaels defeated Ric Flair to retire him. And I know that's kind of funny seeing how he went on to wrestle again in TNA a bunch of times. But it was supposed to be his retirement. But yeah, this is an emotional time. The year before, Vince McMahon, I can't remember, but him and Ric Flair had some trouble or something. Vince had some problem with Ric Flair where he told him Next time you lose a match is your last match. So basically to keep continuing to wrestle, he had to win every match. So he did pretty good. Went on a big winning streak, and then come WrestleMania time, they announced Ric Flair was going in the Hall of Fame. Who was the first ever wrestler currently wrestling to go in the Hall of Fame, which is a big deal at the time. But Ric Flair wanted a big opponent for that set, so he picked Shawn Michaels, and Shawn didn't want to do it, them being friends. But he ended up getting Shawn to do it, and Shawn's like, "I'm gonna put you down, old yeller," and then that made Ric Flair mad. But just a classic match, one of the best of both of their careers, and that says a lot for Ric Flair being at the end of his career here. A lot of back and forth. He kicked out of one Sweet Chin Music, and then we get that famous scene at the end where Shawn's getting ready for the Sweet Chin Music and then stops, and then Ric Flair's like, "Come on," and he's got tears in his eyes, and then Shawn's mouths, "I'm sorry, I love you," and at that moment, watching live, I still remember it to this day. I closed my eyes because Ric Flair is my all-time favorite wrestler of all time. Despite all the personal stuff he's done the last few years that put him in a very bad light, still my favorite wrestler of all time. But I could not watch the end of his career, so I closed my eyes and listened to the 3 count. And I was actually crying. Yes, I'll admit, I was actually crying. It got me. And then that amazing send-off he had the next night on Raw, just perfect weekend for Ric Flair. It's too bad he came back in TNA. The one good thing out of that was him and Jay Lethal. Jay Lethal pretending to be Ric Flair. That's the best thing we got out of that. And then, of course, we had to have a match, in between there that really didn't seem to mean much. Which, in this match, it definitely didn't. It was Beth Phoenix and Melina with Santina Marella defeating Maria and Ashley in a Playboy Bunny Mania Lumberjill match, after Beth Phoenix pinned Maria after a fisherman suplex. The ring was surrounded by divas, and Snoop Dogg was the master of ceremonies. And I noticed on camera, they would show him at times, and he'd be sitting in this big chair ringside. This noise around him, match going on in the ring, and he's literally sitting there sleeping. He was sleeping during. That's like one of the funniest things I've ever seen at WrestleMania. But just everything in this. The lights in the arena went out at some point, and not on purpose. It should have went out on the whole thing, and they should have ended it. But Jerry Lawler came out and came over and knocked out Santino after trying to get involved. And then after the match, Snoop Dogg gave Santino a clothesline and kissed Maria. Just complete garbage match, but some of the funniest stuff that happened. Then we've got WWE Champion Randy Orton retaining his title, defeating Triple H and John Cena in a triple threat match. Cena came out with a marching band that played him to the ring, and Orton won. I think it was, Triple H had a pedigree on Cena, and then Orton did the punt kick to Triple H and then pinned Cena, to keep his title. So big match there for Randy Orton. Then we got a celebrity fight. It was a no disqualification boxer versus wrestler thing between Big Show and Floyd Mayweather Jr. And then Mayweather used the brass knuckles to knock out Big Show. Kind of a funny story about Mayweather. We had this boxing game. I don't know if it was Ready to Rumble. No, it was Knockout Kings. It was Knockout Kings for Nintendo 64. It was just a random game we got. We didn't really care about boxing, but it was fun to play it on the game. But the absolute worst boxer, and this was around 2000, 2001 or something. The absolute worst boxer in this game, ranked last, was Floyd Mayweather Jr. We just called him Mayweather, and anytime something would happen to one of us, like we're losing a football game, oh, look, you're Mayweathering or something. So, turns out later on that he ends up winning all these fights and becomes one of the best undefeated streaks ever in boxing. But we all know him as the loser in this boxing game, because it must have been the beginning of his career, so they had him ranked really low or something. It's just funny how Mayweather was a synonymous term with me and my brothers as loser, but he ended up being a hugely successful boxer. And in the main event, Undertaker defeated World Heavyweight Champion Edge by submission with his Hell's Gate maneuver to win the title and improve his streak to 16-0. So a pretty big WrestleMania. Obviously, my favorite there is Flair versus Shawn Michaels. Now we're getting to number 6, one of the more current WrestleManias compared to those, WrestleMania 31. And I actually watched this on the WWE Network. This was March 29th, 2015 from San Francisco, California at Levi Stadium, which is home of the 49ers. As of this date, this is the last Mania to actually be held in March because, they're all in April now and it seems like they're getting later and later. The last couple of years, especially in Vegas. 67,000 people attended. Aloe Black, whoever that is, performed America the Beautiful. Sorry, I've never heard of that person before. I can't even remember that, so sorry. Commentators were Michael Cole, Jerry Lawler, and JBL. Good team there. And they had 2 pre-show matches. The first one, WWE Tag Team Champions. They like to shove a lot of multi-person matches in these WrestleManias, as if I haven't said already. Tyson Kidd and Cesaro with Natalya. They won a Fatal 4-Way match to retain their titles. They defeated the Usos with Naomi. The New Day, which was Kofi Kingston and Big E. Los Matadors with El Torito, if you remember them. And they defeated, I think, Cesaro pinned Jimmy Uso. And sadly, during the match, Jey Uso would actually tear his shoulder and be out for several months. Of course, bigger things to come for the Usos down the line after this. The second pre-show match, Big Show won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, last eliminating Damien Mizdow, if you remember him, Damien Sandow, but he was doing the stunt double gimmick for The Miz. He was really popular. I wish he could make a comeback. I think he's in the NWA now. But they can still sign him. And then the first match of the night was another huge multi-man match. It was a ladder match for the Intercontinental title. Bad News Barrett was a champion, and Daniel Bryan won the match. The other competitors, besides Bad News Barrett, obviously, were R-Truth, Dean Ambrose, Luke Harper, Dolph Ziggler, and Stardust. Yes, the crappy alter ego that they made Goldust. They made Cody Rhodes have. Bryan would end up having to vacate the title due to injuries and eventually retire for a few years after this. Then we get the next match. Really memorable moment in this. Randy Orton defeated Seth Rollins. But the memorable moment was when Seth went for the curb stomp and Randy kind of elevated him up into the air, as he was set up for it, and then hit the RKO, like one of the most memorable RKOs of all time. So Orton won the match, and that would not be the last time we'd see Seth on this night, if you remember WrestleMania 31's main event. Triple H defeated Sting in a no disqualification match using a sledgehammer. This gets talked a lot about as like crappy, and I can see why people were upset. I like all the interference because of the nostalgia, but people were saying, rightfully so too, that they made it more about WCW versus WWF when nobody really cared about WWE, when that was long gone, because Sting represented WCW. So you had DX come out to help Triple H, and the NWO had come out to help Sting, which was weird because Sting fought against the NWO, is what made Sting the most popular he ever was in WCW. And that's saying a lot because he was popular his whole run. But, that 97 Starrcade Sting, nobody can touch him in popularity outside of, Stone Cold and possibly The Rock. And Hogan, obviously, during his heyday. But, yeah. And it's funny because some of the members of, Shawn Michaels, X-Pac was also 6 in the NWO. So, some of the members are kind of... but anyway, I like the match for what it was. People look too serious, like, Sting should have got his win. Sometimes wrestling's not that serious, people. It's a match. It's what it was. It was put on for nostalgia purposes. At the end of the day, is your life going to be really ruined because Sting didn't win and, he should have won this? And, I wanted Sting to win too, but, guess what? My life went on the next day. I wasn't like... oh no, I can no longer go on. Sting lost. Sometimes people take things too seriously. Like there's a line between, being a fan and getting into it and everything, and that's completely fine. But when you just all day complain and whine, and it really affects your attitude, that's just crossing a line you don't need to cross as a fan. And then we got AJ Lee and Paige defeating the Bella Twins when AJ made Nikki tap with the Black Widow. John Cena defeated WWE U.S. Champion Rusev to win the title after an AA. And this was the first time Rusev had been pinned in WWE since debuting. And also, the start would be the start of the John Cena U.S. Open Challenge, which has been used for years since, it seems like all the good guys that win the U.S. title have the Open Challenge, and the bad guys are like, you know what, I'm not defending it every week like you did. They're like, we're not doing that. That was kind of the start of that with John Cena. Let's see. Then Triple H and Stephanie announced the attendance and said it was all because of the Authority, because this was the Authority days. Then The Rock makes a special return and comes out and, telling them off, and then grabs Ronda Rousey out of the crowd, which at this point she hadn't been signed, and she gets in the ring and they kind of back them off, and it seems like that's supposed to, that was supposed to be a match for like next year's WrestleMania. Just The Rock never showed back up, or Ronda didn't sign or something. The match would end up taking place 3 years later, but it wouldn't be The Rock would be her partner. It would be Kurt Angle, where they took on Triple H and Stephanie. Then the Undertaker Wyatt with a tombstone, and this was actually Undertaker's first match since the year previous. Well, obviously, it's the first WrestleMania match since the last one. No, but his first one since having his undefeated streak broken by Brock Lesnar the year before. So he got back on his winning ways. I guess looking to start a new streak. He wouldn't. But then the main event was the WWE World Title match between Brock Lesnar, the champion, and Roman Reigns. Well, that match was going on as a Brock Lesnar Roman Reigns match during those days would, until Seth Rollins comes down with his briefcase, cashing in, and turned it into a triple threat match, which is the first time I think that had been done. Previously, it had just been, if it was cash in, it was normally either announced before, which is rarely, or just a surprise, after a match. I think this is the first time it actually got turned into a triple threat match, which you'd think that Seth would have waited until, the match was over, but it didn't matter because he ended up winning the match. He pinned Roman Reigns, and of course they called it the heist of the century. Michael Cole famously on commentary. That image of him swinging the belt around at the end. And, of course he would go on and be a dominant champion, sadly until November, where he, over in Ireland, he was going to do like a sunset flip powerbomb to Kane, routine thing. He flipped over, put his legs on the ground, and tore like a ton of ligaments in his knee and be out for almost 9 months. A little fluke accident there, ended a big reign for him. Who knows what it was, probably going to hold on to the title till at least WrestleMania, if not, keep it. Who knows what, I don't remember exactly what the plan was, for the next challenger at WrestleMania, but definitely a sad moment there. Hope you guys are enjoying this so far. Hopefully I'm not just rambling through everything. Sorry about all the blah, 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 mess up words and stuff, but anyway, we're moving on to our top 5 now. Number 5 is the first of two-night events on my list, and it is WrestleMania 39. I watched this one on Peacock, but delayed because when they started the 2-night thing, and really even before that, they'd started doing pay-per-views on Saturdays, which I hate, for the simple fact is that I am a ring announcer, co-owner, cameraman, bell ringer, music player, 9 million jobs person at Supreme Wrestling, which is local here in Madison, Indiana. And our events are every Saturday night, so whenever there's a pay-per-view, I miss it. And this WrestleMania was no exception. Now, this year I'm not missing it because I'm actually not going to be there that day. But in the past, I've had to miss these, which really sucks because you can't get on Facebook at all because you can't get spoilers. And the way Peacock, the way the WWE Network was, is you could actually start it anywhere, even if it had been on for 3 hours, you can start at the beginning. With Peacock, if it gets past a certain point, you have to wait till it's over, till they put the replay on there, which should be available instantly. Anyway, with ESPN app, it's much better. You can start it even just like with the network, I think. Just a little harder to do, but anyway, that's beside the point. This show was, like I said, the first 2-night WrestleMania on our countdown. Not the first one ever. It was April 1st and 2nd, 2023 from Los Angeles, California's SoFi Stadium. This was also called WrestleMania Goes Hollywood. They also did the parodies like 21 did, but nowhere near as good. Like, not even close as the originals. This was actually supposed to be where WrestleMania 37 was, but of course COVID happened, making that WrestleMania have to be at the Performance Center when they were gonna have it at Raymond James Stadium, which was Tampa Bay Buccaneers Stadium. So they ended up having that WrestleMania the next year, and then pushing this off for 2 more years to WrestleMania 39. It's actually the last WrestleMania owned by, technically, ran by Vince McMahon, even though he wasn't in charge at the time. Because the day after this, they announced that they're sell to Endeavor, and then they become TKO with, UFC being a part of it. But kind of an end of an era here. Commentators were Michael Cole and Corey Graves. Again, another good combo. And then we're going to go through, night 1 and night 2. Night 1, the first match, WWE US Champion Austin Theory retained his title, defeating John Cena after a low blow. I remember finding this match just so underwhelming. It was just like, I don't know, something about it felt off. They just didn't have good chemistry. They might now. I know Cena's retired, but with Austin Theory, aligned with Paul Heyman and more of an edge to him, it might be might have been a better match later on. Then we got the Street Profits. Street Profits defeat Braun Strowman and Ricochet, Alpha Academy, and the Viking Warriors in what they're calling a men's showcase match, which is a fatal 4-way tag team match for no title, so they had to give it a name, the men's showcase match. Don't worry, there's a women's showcase match, same format the next night. But like I said, Street Profits won that. Seth Rollins pinned Logan Paul after a curb stomp. Lita, Trish Stratus, and Becky Lynch won a 6-women's tag team match, defeating Damage Control, which was at the time Bayley, Dakota Kai, and Io Sky. Rey Mysterio pinned his son Dominic Mysterio in their big WrestleMania match. That was definitely one of the featured matches of the night. Rhea Ripley defeated SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte Flair after a riptide off the top rope. Was actually and won the title. It was actually the first time Charlotte had been pinned in a singles match at WrestleMania. Then the hosts for the night were The Miz and Snoop Dogg. They came out to announce the attendance, and as Snoop Dogg, kind of goaded The Miz into facing a mystery opponent. He's like, you need to have a match at WrestleMania if you really want it to be must-see. And it turned out to be Pat McAfee who beat The Miz. And then the main event was the first time the WWF tag team titles had actually, or WWE I should say, tag team titles had been defended in a main event at WrestleMania. It was Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn defeating WWE Undisputed Tag Team Champions, the Usos, to win the titles after their historic, how many days were they champions? 622 days. Like I said, it was the first time, they were the first time the tag team titles were on the line at a WrestleMania main event, and the only second match in history that was a tag team match for the main event. Of course, the very first WrestleMania was Hogan and Mr. T against Mr. Wonderful and Jimmy Superfly Snuka. No, it wasn't. I knew that was wrong. I was thinking in my head he was one of the managers. It was Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful. I knew that sounded off. Yeah, that was the very first WrestleMania main event and the very first tag team main event, obviously. And then we go to night 2, and just a weird nothing match, really. Just 2 big guys, as opposed to this year where it's 2 big guys are actually athletic. Brock Lesnar and Obafemi this year should be good. Brock Lesnar versus Omos, or Almost, as Jim Cornette calls him, with MVP after an F5, just whatever. Ronda Rousey, here's this WrestleMania Women's Showcase, a Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match for nothing, but just to showcase them. It's just dumb, just a reason to have a bunch of people on there without a title involved. Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler won. They defeated Natalya and Shotzi, Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville, and Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez. Okay, next is basically what that match is. WWE Intercontinental Champion Gunther retained his title in a triple threat match. He defeated Sheamus and Drew McIntyre. That was definitely a big freaking hard-hitting match of the night, definitely. WWE Raw Women's Champion Bianca Belair retained her title against Asuka, pinning her after the KOD. And then we had another segment with the guest hosts announcing the attendance, and Snoop Dogg gets The Miz to wrestle another match, which actually is history. It's the first time someone's wrestled in since they started the 2-night events and back-to-back WrestleManias. Of course, that would change. But the special opponent this time turned out to be Shane McMahon, who ends up tearing a quad during the very beginning of the match. So Snoop Dogg has to call an audible, gets in the ring and like hits these like the world's worst looking people's elbows and pins The Miz to win the match, even though he wasn't in it. Like, great thinking by Snoop Dogg, who's obviously not normally a part of the business, but he was thinking on his feet. You know, I need to do something. You know, Shane McMahon's hurt. This is ruined. You know, they can't just call it off and say okay next. So Snoop Dogg, credit to him. He's enough of a fan. I need to get in there and do something. And he, obviously being Snoop Dogg, he's not going to get in trouble over that. And I don't think anybody else really would have. They might have got yelled at, but I think any of the other wrestlers would have been afraid to improvise, without them being told something to do. But like I said, it's Snoop Dogg. What are they going to do? Fire him? Then we got a Hell in a Cell match. Edge pinned the Demon Finn Balor to win after a concerto. And then we get the main event. WWE Undisputed Champion Roman Reigns with Paul Heyman and Solo Sikoa retained his title over Cody Rhodes after Solo hit the Samoan Spike and then Reigns hit a spear. This was the, supposed to be, Cody finishing the story, but, it was a huge letdown, and a lot of people was like, they should have done it this year. Wait a year. But, of course, this would actually be the main event at next year's WrestleMania. But, I originally, when I was doing this countdown, I was going to I'll separate, I won't include 2-night WrestleManias because it's not really fair because there's more matches. But then as I looked down, it's like, well, just because there's more matches doesn't automatically mean that this is better than a WrestleMania with half the matches. So I decided, I'll just include both matches because it's part of the whole story. Especially with WrestleMania 40, which I'll be getting to, is actually, spoiler, it's on here higher up. But that was the main events of both nights were an overarching story, which is, really good storytelling. They're doing that now. Really great job in, tying those together. They don't have to do that every year, but they can go back to it. I think it's a good tool to have if they're going to do these 2-night WrestleManias, where some years, the main events can be independent of each other, have nothing to do with each other. Some years they could, have this big story just like there was then. But we're going to move on now to number 4 on my list. And this one is WrestleMania 30. This is the very first WrestleMania on the WWE Network. It just debuted like the month before, or a couple months before. This was April 6, 2013 from New Orleans, Louisiana, from the Superdome. 65,000 in attendance, and the first Mania in New Orleans. They'd have another one in 34, and they were supposed to have it this year, but they backed out because Las Vegas offered them more money, so they're having it in Las Vegas 2 years in a row. But it was supposed to be New Orleans this year. They even announced it in New Orleans during a SmackDown. The Rock came out in front of the crowd, like, WrestleMania's going to be here, yay! And then, nope. Too much money be had in Las Vegas. But commentators were Michael Cole, Jerry Lawler, and JBL. There's a pre-show match, multi-man thing. WWE Tag Team Champions, the Usos, retained their titles in a fatal 4-way match against Ryback, which I didn't even remember was a team. Ryback and Curtis Axel. Los Matadors with El Torito. And the Real Americans, Jack Swagger and Cesaro with Zeb Coulter. One of my favorite managers of all time. I know everybody knows him more as Dirty Dutch Mantel, but Zeb, he was so funny of a character. He reminded me of like Archie Bunker type character that I'm surprised they got away with in, this time period. The event started with Hulk Hogan coming to the ring and saying, all you fans here in the Silverdome. He thought it was WrestleMania 3 still. And Stone Cold would come out and The Rock, and they would both laugh. It's like, we are in the Superdome, aren't we? They ended up toasting each other in the crowd. It was a great way to start off WrestleMania. Just, 3 legends coming together, to say, here we go. And then the first match was a big one. Daniel Bryan pinned Triple H. The winner of the match would actually get put into the main event, the world title main event between Orton and Batista. And like I said, Daniel Bryan won, and then Triple H attacked his arm after the match. So, he's going into this match completely beat up, not just from having a match, but, Triple H basically destroyed his arm. Basically trying to build up that underdog story even more with Daniel Bryan. Of course, it would definitely pay off at the end. If it wouldn't have paid off, it would have sucked. And then we got the Shield defeating Weird Team of the New Age Outlaws and Kane. It was a corporate Kane. This was during the Authority. New Age Outlaws, of course, being Triple H's friends. fought for the Authority, which is stupid to think of. Those are the most anti-authority people you can think of. But anyway, the Shield ended up winning. They did the triple powerbomb on both members of the New Age Outlaws. Cesaro won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, last eliminating the Big Show. He did basically an homage to the Hogan slamming Andre at the Silverdome, not the Superdome. He slammed Big Show and then eliminated him to win the match. John Cena pinned Bray Wyatt, with Luke Harper and Eric Rowan after an AA. And of course, they would go on to have that weird Firefly Funhouse match at WrestleMania. Is it 35 or 36? The one at the Performance Center. I think it was 36. In 2020, I know. But anyway, then the next match. This was a shocker. Brock Lesnar defeating The Undertaker's undefeated streak. This was like a crazy match. The streak obviously ended at 21-0. But they did everything like Paul Heyman had a shocked look on his face. Like, he is so good at blurring the lines where he almost makes you think that something's happening it's not supposed to. And then they didn't hit Lesnar's music at first, almost making it seem like they weren't ready to do it. So, they made it look like that. But according to everything the Undertaker said, that was the planned finish. It had changed throughout the day, but that was what they were planning on doing. There was, Brock Lesnar didn't take liberties as far as beat him up to where although with what happened in the match, he actually probably could have, because Undertaker got a severe concussion during the match, ended up having to go to the hospital afterwards. So I could have really seen that actually, not being the finish and Brock Lesnar just winning. But that actually wasn't what happened. But still, a huge moment. The guy with the bug eyes. After that, that's how I was at home. I couldn't believe. One of those times I just sit there with my mouth open, what the heck? I thought maybe his streak may end someday or something, but I thought it would be to establish somebody. Brock Lesnar didn't need that. He was already, where people think, oh, Brock Lesnar might be something. He was already something. But anyway, WWE Divas Champion AJ Lee retained her title in a 14 Divas Vicky Guerrero Divas Championship Invitational. Took almost 2 lines to write that. When she made Naomi submit to the Black Widow. This is the only Divas title match in WrestleMania history. Just convoluted, but they had to have something in between the Lesnar ending the streak and the main event. So I guess they put that. They could have put AJ Lee in just a regular match. It would have been fine. But anyway, the next night, famously, Paige from NXT debuted and won the title from AJ Lee on that night, on her very first night. But the main event was Daniel Bryan, who won before, taking on WWE World Heavyweight Champion. It was when they had the WWE and the World title belts at the same time. Randy Orton and then Batista. Batista had won the Royal Rumble famously. Called him Blue Tista because he was wearing blue trunks, so they called him Blue Tista, and they were booing the crap out of him because they wanted Daniel Bryan to win. But this was all a culmination of, Daniel Bryan had been world champion before, but never positioned to be, the Authority was calling him the B+ player. Well, finally tonight, tonight, like it happened just now, he made Batista tap out to the yes lock and, won, and everybody's going yes, and Jerry Lawler called it Yeselmania. But sadly, just like we seen earlier with the Intercontinental title when he won, a couple months later, actually the next month in May, he announced he had to have neck surgery. And the Authority stripped him of the title because he wasn't going to be there, because he legitimately had to have neck surgery. So the title had to be vacated. So, he never really got time to be the next, who knows how long his reign would have went. No, I don't know if it was long term or short term. But anyway, I don't know if it caused any changes. But, what also happened was Triple H had orchestrated an attack on the Shield, and they found out. So they were going after him. So then Triple H reforms Evolution with Orton and Batista, and they face off the Shield in a few matches. And then, it was after their last match where the Shield won, that Triple H famously said, "There's always a plan B." And then Seth Rollins with that famous attack from behind with the chair, taking out Roman Reigns, and then Dean Ambrose, and Seth Rollins joining the Authority, and that becomes the breakup of the Shield and the start of their singles careers. And of course, Seth Rollins was, the big man at first. Dean Ambrose got a little bit of that later, and then of course Roman Reigns. Look at him now. All by that. And they go back to that betrayal so much, especially in that WrestleMania 40 main event. Like, such a big deal and such a big time. That's why that's my WrestleMania 30 is my fourth pick, or number 4 on the list, I should say, not fourth pick. But next up, we're going back in time a little bit for number 3 is WrestleMania 19. I said a little bit, not a whole lot. I didn't get to watch this one live. I watched it sometime later on DVD. It was March 30th, 2003 from Seattle, Washington, Safeco Field, which I think is T-Mobile Park now or something. 54,097 in attendance. The very first WrestleMania in Seattle. And also the first WrestleMania that was under the WWE name. And the first since they did the brand split, Raw and SmackDown. Commentators were JR and the King for Raw and Michael Cole and Taz for SmackDown. And then they had a match on Sunday Night Heat, which... why 2 of these people were on Sunday Night Heat blows my mind, but RVD and Kane, yes, RVD and Kane should have been featured, if not in a main event, in a big match in WrestleMania. They were on Sunday Night Heat, wrestling and losing to the WWE Tag Team Champions Lance Storm and Chief Morley, if you remember him. He was trying to be the chief of Raw under Eric Bischoff. It was Val Venus going under his real name, Sean Morley, but calling himself Chief Morley. But yeah, they beat RVD and Kane on Sunday Night Heat. Like, why couldn't they be used throughout the show? I mean, come on. Anyway, the show starts off with WWE Cruiserweight Champion Matt Hardy retaining his title. He pinned Rey Mysterio using the ropes. The Undertaker, in one of his not so good WrestleMania matches, defeated A-Train and the Big Show in a handicap match using the tombstone on A-Train. It was supposed, and extended his streak to 11-0, but it was 11-0. But it was supposed to be Undertaker teaming with Nathan Jones, the Australian guy. But they said he got attacked before the show by the FBI, but was really, he had no business in that match. Undertaker was better off in a handicap match. I think he did come down during the match. It's what's the point? Trish Stratus defeated WWE Women's Champion Victoria and Jazz in a triple threat match to win the title after hitting the chick kick on Victoria. WWE Tag Team Champions Team Angle, which was Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, retained their titles, defeating Rhino and Chris Benoit and Los Guerreros in a triple threat tag team match. Benjamin pinned Chavo after a gore from Rhino. Then we get another one of classic WrestleMania matches. Shawn Michaels defeated Chris Jericho. It was called a battle of generations, even though Jericho debuted in 1990 and Shawn Michaels wasn't too earlier than that, but still, Shawn Michaels was big by the mid 90s when Chris Jericho had not really was just kind of he'd started in 1990 but really doesn't have the same career trajectory as Shawn Michaels, so it was still billed as a match of the generations. Shawn rolled him up and then offered a handshake, and then Jericho low blowed him, and they would continue their feud, obviously. And of course, have an even bigger and better feud, I think 2008 after Ric Flair had retired, and they'd had a really personal feud. They put Jericho put Shawn Michaels' face into the Geritron. I think it was what it was called. Is that what it's called? I think he called it the Geritron or something like that. But then Shawn Michaels' wife was also involved, so it was really personal and better later on. But this was, the very first time they faced. Then one of the dumbest matches in WrestleMania history. Stupid pillow fight. Stacy Keibler and Tori Wilson versus the Miller Lite Catfight Girls. If you remember that time, the Miller Lite commercial, they had these girls that was catfighting, just trying to sell beer. Look, there's 2 women fighting each other. Who, buy beer because somehow if you drink this will happen. I don't know. It ended up with Jonathan Coachman ended up having his pants pulled down for some damn reason. I don't know. Stupid time filler. Then we get the World Heavyweight Championship match. Triple H and with Ric Flair retaining his title, pinning Booker T after a pedigree. And people were like, he should have lost the match. Booker T should have won because he was being racist. That was the whole point of the Triple H. People like you. He was saying people like you, referring without saying you're black, so you but it was and people were saying that because of what he said that Triple H should have lost the match to Booker T, and I see that, But I also see that that maybe Triple H wins and then Booker T wins later on, but they never even go back to it. So it kind of sucks for Booker T. I don't hate the outcome. It's just and the build, I didn't find it as racist as some people did. Like there's people like and there's always white people too that are like finding it the most racist. It's like, calm down, they're not making fun of you. Nobody else seemed to have a problem with it. But I think to their point though, I think if they're going to kind of go in that direction, you got to kind of have Booker T eventually come out the winner. He wouldn't end up being world champion until the King Booker stuff later on, and by then he was a heel. Would have been a perfect place for a Booker T babyface run. Even if he didn't keep it long, it still would have been a good title run. Then we had The Rock finally defeat Stone Cold Steve Austin after 3 rock bottoms in their third match. Of course, WrestleMania 15, Austin won the title from The Rock. And then in WrestleMania 17, he won the title from The Rock again and, aligned with Vince McMahon and turned heel. But this was kind of the end of an era. The Rock was going to Hollywood. He wouldn't have another match until WrestleMania 20 the following year. This was Stone Cold's last match until, I think it was WrestleMania 38 when he faced off with Kevin Owens, that surprise return he did. But yeah, and then if you have the WrestleMania 20 DVD by chance, there's it's called The Mania of WrestleMania. It was actually a documentary that was aired actually the weekend before WrestleMania 20, but they included it on that DVD. But it's about WrestleMania 19, and it tells the story of the night before the match. Stone Cold had some energy drinks and was so anxious that his heart rate was racing and had to go to the hospital. And they thought he was having a heart attack, and it just turned out, I think, to be a bad panic attack. And also, of course, this is Austin. Like I said, Austin's last match for a super long time. He only had one more after this, like decades later. And it was because of his neck issues, because of all the damage and stuff. And he didn't tell anybody outside of maybe The Rock that this was his last match. But yeah, definitely like an end of an era there. And then we get the main event of just a classic. Brock Lesnar defeating WWE Champion Kurt Angle to win the title. Kurt had been dodging Brock for months, even though Brock finally won the Royal Rumble to get the shot. And then they had this classic match as you'd expect out of those two, their very first match. And, famously, Brock goes for the shooting star press, which he'd done in OVW, and I'd heard about, but I'd never seen him do it. So I knew, I figured, he's going to do it. Everybody was saying that online. So he does it, but then lands basically on his head, screws his neck up, gets up and hits an F5, beats Kurt. They're both all loopy out of it anyway. They hug at the end, but then, Lesnar would, go on to hold the title till Kurt came back, and they would kind of trade it back and forth, with Lesnar eventually winning it back again, turning heel. He would go on to lose the title to Eddie Guerrero and then be out of wrestling for like 14 years or something like that. Was it 14 years? No, it was like 10 years, I think. He went to play football, and that didn't turn out, and he went to the UFC. But, after that stink fest of a match that he had with Goldberg at WrestleMania 20. But, yeah, that was my choice for number 3, WrestleMania 19. Now we're getting into my second choice, number 2 on my list, and that is WrestleMania 40. Now, obviously a more recent one. I watched this on Peacock. Obviously, I didn't get to watch it live, like I said about the other one. This was April 6th and 7th, 2024, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at Lincoln Financial Field, which was the home of the Philadelphia Eagles. And, of course, I forgot to give the attendance before, but a combined attendance tonight of 120,000, not tonight, but of the two nights, 120,239 people. Is the first WrestleMania under the TKO management. Commentators were Michael Cole, Corey Graves, and Pat McAfee. Night 1 started off with WWE Women's Champion Rhea Ripley retaining her title, defeating Becky Lynch after 2 riptides. Then we got a multi-man chaos thing here. The Awesome Truth, which is R-Truth and The Miz, won the undisputed WWE Tag Team titles in a 6-pack tag team ladder match, defeating the champions of the Judgment Day, which was Finn Balor and Damian Priest. DIY, The New Day, which Big E had to retire by then, sadly. So it was Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods. A-Town Down Under, which was Austin Theory and Grayson Waller. And New Catch Republic, Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne. Another multi-man thing. The Awesome Truth winning the tag team titles. Rey Mysterio and Andrade with the LWO defeated Dominic Mysterio and Santos Escobar after Rey pinned Escobar after a splash. And they had two masked wrestlers attack the bad guys during the match. Turned out to be two idiots from the freaking Eagles. One of them's the idiot Kelsey's brother. I can't stand him freaking... Anyway, that's about football. Back to this. Jey Uso pinned Jimmy Uso after an Uso splash. And this match was like panned by everybody. I don't find it as bad and like offensive as some people. Some people find this like, oh, I can't believe I had to watch this. Like, they should pay me. Like, it wasn't that bad. It was just they're a tag team, and I mean, they split up and had a good. Jay also can go singles, and so can Jimmy. But those two facing off against each other, they were just doing the same 6,000 super kicks and splashes. It was like they should have changed up something. You know what I mean? It was just like. It was like taking a wrestler on a video game and having them face themselves, and you get all the same moves, basically. I think that was the big problem with it. It was supposed to be like this blood feud, and they're just doing all these super kicks and stuff that really meant nothing because they didn't beat anybody with them. Jade Cargill, Bianca Belair, and Naomi defeated Damage Control, which at this time was Dakota Kai, Asuka, and Kairi Sane in a 6-woman tag team match. Cargill hit Jaded on Dakota Kai. And then Sami Zayn defeated WWE Intercontinental Champion Gunther after 2 haluva kicks to win the title and end Gunther's historic 666-day reign as Intercontinental Champion, the longest reign ever. That was a big, big match for Sami. And hopefully someday he'll be win the world title and have that. But if not, he's always got that. And the Mania before winning that the main event, the tag team titles with Kevin Owens. And then in the main event, which would directly impact Night 2's main event, it was the Bloodline, which is The Rock and Roman Reigns, defeating Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. And due to a pre-match stipulation, the next night's title match between the two would be Bloodline rules. If Cody's team would have won, then all members of the Bloodline would have been banned from ringside. But of course, that didn't happen. And of course, this also, The Rock's involvement. Famously, Cody wins the Royal Rumble again, and The Rock comes back and says, I have unfinished business with Roman Reigns. I'm going to face him with the title. And Cody's like, okay. Just like, okay, you're going to give up your title match and have it at another time and not WrestleMania? Which was stupid, and the fans hated it, so they completely changed course with Cody saying, you know what, Rock, I'm not letting you do this, which led to The Rock siding with Roman Reigns. It was a smart move because that would have sucked if that actually would have happened. And they had Rock versus Roman Reigns, and Cody just kind of, I'll wait my turn. So it would have completely ruined Cody's career, I think. He would have not gotten to the heights he's gotten now. But yeah, so anyway, Bloodline rules will take place in the main event of Night 2. And starting Night 2, big way, Drew McIntyre finally got his world title win in front of a crowd because famously he won the title during the COVID WrestleMania, so no fans were there. So he'd always said, I didn't get to celebrate in front of the fans, and he's a heel at this point. But he defeated World Heavyweight Champion Seth Rollins to win the title after 2 Claymore kicks. But he'd been feuding with CM Punk, who'd been injured at that point. CM Punk was doing commentary. After the match, he was like running his mouth to CM Punk, and then Punk took off his brace to show he was healed, beat the crap out of Drew, and then Damian Priest, Money in the Bank winner from the previous year, came out and cashed in and beat Drew McIntyre for the title. So that really set up that feud between Drew and CM Punk. That was like so big, and like if it didn't win Feud of the Year, which I haven't checked the awards for like PWI or anything, it should have won if it didn't. Then we got a match I don't seem to remember much of. The Pride, I don't even remember them being called that. Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits defeated the Final Testament, Karrion Kross, and the Authors of Pain. Whoop-de-doo. In a Philadelphia street fight with Snoop Dogg as a special guest commentator and Bubba Ray Dudley as special guest referee. And that's literally the only thing I remember about that match is Bubba Ray being introduced to the Philadelphia crowd as a special referee. Don't even remember who was in the match, but the Pride won when Lashley pinned Kross after Montez Ford put him through a table with a splash. Then we got LA Knight winning his very first WrestleMania match. He pinned AJ Styles after a BFT. WWE US Champion Logan Paul retained his title in a triple threat match against Kevin Owens and Randy Orton after pinning Owens after a frog splash, which is just crazy to think that Logan Paul beat those two, but he did. Bayley pinned WWE Women's Champion Io Sky to win the title for the second time after the Rose Plant. And then the main event. Finally, Cody Rhodes finishes the story. He defeats Roman Reigns, ending his historic 1,316-day reign as WWE Undisputed Champion. Of course, there's all the interference. Solo comes out, The Rock. Then we get John Cena and Undertaker showing up in there. And then finally Seth Rollins, you hear the Shield music, Seth coming through the crowd dressed in Shield gear, which throws Roman off because they're like putting that story that's just been in Roman's head ever since that day when Seth turned his back on the Shield and hit him in the back with a chair, that it's just been eating away at him. And finally Seth gets in the ring and stands there with his back to him, and Roman's got the chair in his hand. What does Roman do? Does he go after Cody, or does he finally and he finally decides to get that revenge on Seth, which ends up what costing him the match, and basically, Seth Rollins was Cody Rhodes' Shield for that. Of course, they would go on to feud later on, once Seth turned bad. He's good again now, but of course, like I said, Cody ends up hitting 3 crossroads and winning the title, finally finishing the story. I think it turned out even better than if Cody would have won it the year before. All the build up and then all the stuff. It's just really put this WrestleMania over the top and made it, of course, Cody would hold the title until the next year's WrestleMania when the John Cena heel turn happened and he beat him for the stupid Travis Scott crap. And The Rock was supposed to be involved, but screwed them out of that and really made that into a stinker of a match. But anyway, before we get to my number 1 pick, I'm going to give my worst WrestleMania of all time. Not going to run down all the stuff for it, but my worst WrestleMania of all time has to be WrestleMania 9. The very first Las Vegas WrestleMania. It takes place basically in a parking lot that they turned into this outdoor arena. And it was all Roman themed, which was just weird at the time. They weren't doing anything like that. And just all of a sudden, it's Roman themed for some reason because we're at Caesar's Palace, which Caesar's Palace is an outdoor crap. But, yeah, it was just bad. We had the Giant Gonzalez versus the Undertaker. And Undertaker still, never forgives Bruce Pritchard for booking that match. The horrible main event with, Brett losing the title to Yokozuna. And then Hogan immediately somehow coming out and getting a title match at the very end. And Brett's like, yeah, I get it. And then Hogan immediately beats him. And then loses the title to Yokozuna at King of the Ring and leaves. That's pretty much the start of Bret Hart being bitter right there. You blame Hogan for that. But yeah, just the overall, everything. There were some good moments, but just overall, probably the worst WrestleMania of all time. But my favorite WrestleMania of all time is a lot of people's favorite. Coming in at number 1 is WrestleMania 17. I didn't actually get to see this live. I watched it a couple years later on DVD, but it was great. And it really symbolized pretty much the end of the Attitude Era, so it's kind of bittersweet. But I'll get into that. It was on April 1st, 2001 from Houston, Texas, from the Astrodome. 67,925 in attendance. Surprisingly, the very first WrestleMania in Texas at that point. Commentators were JR and Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman had just replaced Jerry Lawler, who walked out because his wife got fired. So he walked out to kind of be with her and show us I don't know what word I'm looking for, but stay I'm taking up for you. But then she ends up leaving him for somebody else. Crappy woman. Anyway, like I said, JR and Paul Heyman, they do a really good job at commentary too. There's a Sunday Night Heat match. It's a crap fest. X Factor, which is X-Pac and Just Incredible with Albert, defeated Grandmaster Sexay and Steve Blackman. I can see why that was on Sunday Night Heat. Then the very first match, we got Intercontinental Champion Chris Jericho retaining his title, defeating Commissioner William Regal after a lion salt. Really good back and forth match with them. Then we got Taz and the APA defeating Right to Censor, which was the Good Father, not the Godfather, the Good Father. Val Venus and Bull Buchanan in a 6-man tag match. Bradshaw hit Good Father with a clothesline from hell. Really good hardcore match. Kane defeated WWE Hardcore Champion, at the time WWF Hardcore Champion, Raven, and the Big Show, and they obviously a triple threat hardcore match. They went all around the back. They went trying to go on a golf cart chase, but Big Show was so heavy that Raven like wrecked the cart into like this fencing area, so they couldn't do the golf cart chase they were going to do. And they were like just inches from running over all the lines that would have took out the entire pay-per-view. If that would have happened, who knows what this pay-per-view would have ended up as if nobody would have been able to see it. But Kane ended up winning, like diving onto both men off this part of the stage, onto like all these like tables and debris and stuff. But yeah, Kane becoming hardcore champion. Eddie Guerrero defeated European champion Test to win the title after using the title on Test's head. And an absolute classic, Kurt Angle defeated. The whole thing was, they're trying to out-wrestle each other, and, you can't make me tap out, and, how they're both so technical, such technical wrestlers, and then Kurt ends up resorting to cheating by hooking his tights to actually get the win. Chyna defeated WWF Women's Champion Ivory in a match to win the title, and it was just a crappy one-sided short match by Chyna. She hated wrestling females. It was, she wanted to wrestle all the guys. That match is what it was. It was just a way to get Chyna the title, and then she wouldn't be much longer, and she'd be gone from the company. And then we got a big match, the street fight between Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon, which Shane won. He ended up hitting the coast to coast with the garbage can, the drop kick into the face. And of course, this is right after, WWF just bought WCW like 6 days ago, and then Shane McMahon, in storyline mode, announced, "You didn't buy WCW, I bought WCW." So he takes out from under him. Meanwhile, during all this, the match had been happening already because of Vince is like keeping Linda sedated his wife Linda sedated all the time in a wheelchair, and his assistant Trish Stratus, which he's just openly making out with on TV, is keeping her sedated, and so is their daughter Stephanie, who doesn't like Trish, but also doesn't like Linda. It's convoluted. Shane's tired of the crap, so he ends up facing his dad. Mick Foley gets put in as special referee, and then a whole lot of series of events at the end. Trish slaps Vince and turns on him, and then chases Stephanie off. And then Linda rises up out of the corner. Vince had thrown her in the ring, just like, "Watch what I do to your son." And turns out Linda, because Trish had turned on Vince, hadn't been sedating Linda, and they had this plan together. So Linda raises up, gives him the low blow, and then Shane ends up winning. Perfect end to that match. And then next we get one of the best matches of all time, depending on your style of this type of wrestling. But it was TLC 2. Obviously, Edge and Christian won the tag team titles from the Dudley Boys, and also the Hardy Boys were part of that match. And I don't mean like, oh, they were there too. They were all three team members equally. And this match had everything. It had run-ins. Rhino interfered on behalf of Edge and Christian. Lita on behalf of the Hardys, and then Spike Dudley ran in for the Dudley Boys. And I mean, all those classic TLC moments that you remember happened in this match. I know they first had the triangle ladder match in TLC 1, but TLC 2 just took it to a different level, and going through stacks of tables, and for better or for worse, they really set the standard for how tag team wrestling would go. I say for better or for worse because I think wrestlers would go too far later on with the violence and stuff. This was monumental for the time, but almost seems tame by today's standards, it's sad to say. But, like I said, for better or for worse, I wish tag team or just wrestling in general wouldn't have gone as crazy as it's gone with some of the stuff they do now with freaking, AEW with freaking stabbing people with needles and stuff. That's beyond anything and should never be done just because of what it symbolizes. But anyway, I'll get off that soapbox. But yeah, TLC 2 match it is up there with some of the best matches ever, not just Mania. And then, after that, we get the Gimmick Battle Royal, which was just a fun match. Iron Sheik ended up winning. Gene Okerlund and Bobby the Brain Heenan on commentary. I love Bobby the Brain Heenan. The one line that always gets me, because Iron Sheik is, he's old and broken down. He's taking forever to get to the ring, and they're at the Astrodome, so there's this huge ramp. He's just walking along, and the brain's like, it'd be WrestleMania. Oh, what was it? WrestleMania 37 before Iron Sheik gets to the ring. That was hilarious. But yeah, Sheik won. It had everybody in it, from like Doink the Clown, Bruce Pritchard as Brother Love, Jim Cornette, Sergeant Slaughter, Hillbilly Jim, the Gobbledygooker. Just such a fun match. Then we got a big match. The Undertaker defeated Triple H. The first of their 3 WrestleMania matches they would have over the years. At one point, the referee gets knocked down, and then the Undertaker does an elbow to him. He didn't get over. Can't remember if he didn't go over there in time or he was aiming for Triple H. I think he might have been aiming for Triple H. Anyway, the referee just dies for 10 or 15 minutes. He doesn't move. Give time for Undertaker and Triple H to go through the crowd over this big camera platform, and Undertaker choke slams Triple H off of it. Finally, the referees eventually gets back up, but Undertaker beats Triple H finally. I believe they weren't talking about the streak then, but he extended it to 9-0 after the last ride. And then we get to the main event, the final match, obviously, which was the second match in the Stone Cold versus The Rock trilogy, but which you didn't know was a trilogy then. But The Rock had been champion. Austin had been out for almost a year with neck surgery, which in storyline, Rikishi ran him over because he did it for The Rock, but really because Triple H paid him. So The Rock was champion during this time, and Stone Cold comes back with a chip on his shoulder. Obviously, he wants that title back. He needs that title back. Wins the Royal Rumble. And it's babyface versus babyface, good guy versus good guy. And you figure something's got to give. And of course, the freaking the song for the hype package, "My Way" by Limp Bizkit, the most perfect WrestleMania hype package in history is that thing with that song playing. That is the peak there, and this is the peak of the Attitude Era. WWF. I'll get to that in a minute, but anyway. They wrestle each other, and Stone Cold, looks more desperate than normal. He doesn't look like his normal rattlesnake self. He looks desperate at times. And then eventually, after they trade finishers, and this is what else can they do? Who's going to win this match? Vince McMahon comes down, and people wonder why. And most people, most of the fans are cheering. They're cheering both of them, but most of the fans are cheering Stone Cold. They are in Texas. And, Vince comes down, and people are probably thinking, well, he's here to help The Rock. He was part of the corporation in the past. Maybe they're joining up again. Nobody suspected what was going to happen. Vince McMahon ends up helping Stone Cold win the match. And Stone Cold goes crazy, beating The Rock with a chair 15 times. Gets the win, shakes the hand of the devil himself, Vince McMahon. And really, that's the end of an era there. The end of the Attitude Era, basically. They just bought WCW, and ECW went out of business a couple months before then, as you see by Paul Heyman being there. And it was, they'd won the war. This is kind of the end of the era here. Stone Cold, it's almost like Stone Cold shaking hands with Vince is saying, we did it, now I can finally join you. And it's it was crazy. A lot of people didn't like the Stone Cold heel turn. I loved it. I loved the freaking crazed rattlesnake Stone Cold, where he was unhinged. The very next night he would go on and team with the guy that actually paid to have him run over and run out of wrestling, Triple H. Started the 2-man power trip, which who knows where that would have gone, but of course Triple H famously tore his quad on Raw in a tag team match and was out, so that put an end to that. And then the Invasion storyline started. And Stone Cold, they tried to get, they want the old Stone Cold back, to join the WWF, and he finally does, and you're we're going to get a face Stone Cold all of a sudden, even though he's teaming with Vince, is because, WWF is the good guys in this storyline, apparently, even though I love WCW, so I was always, pro WCW and ECW. But anyway, Stone Cold turns his back and joins the Alliance, as they were called, WCW and ECW. Joins them, and then Kurt Angle becomes actually the good guy who, and I was skipping in between all that, Kurt Angle with the cowboy hat and him and Stone Cold singing songs, all that silliness that happened in between the real invasion starting. But then, of course, like I said, Stone Cold turned his back on the WWF, and, he's helping WCW and all these people, and why would he do this? And then finally, WWF wins the war at Survivor Series. The alliance is gone. So the next night, Stone Cold all of a sudden is just a good guy again. He's the champion, so he didn't get fired. All of a sudden, he's a good guy again, and Kurt Angle's the bad guy, even though Stone Cold tried to get rid of WWF. Made no sense. But anyway, that was like the end of an era. And this is kind of the end of this show. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope I didn't ramble on too long. It's just some great moments and brought a lot of great memories flooding back, despite my garbled attempts at speaking today. Anyway, next month I'm going to be back with another bonus episode. It's going to be May 7th of 2026. Obviously, if you don't know, maybe you're watching this 2 years later. Anyway, this episode comes out May 7th on 2026. It's the very first Thursday of the month, and it's just a episode about my favorite board games. I don't know if I'm going to rank any or just talk about some of my favorite board games of all time as a kid and as an adult, and just different variations of the board games. But definitely had a lot of fun in my life playing board games. So I'll be talking about that. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.